I work in a pretty common office job during the week. One of my passions is cooking, so almost every night I prepare dinner for myself. For that, I make a quick trip to the store every 2 days to buy fresh ingredients. On the way back from work, there's a supermarket just a mile from my apartment, and I usually go there because they usually have the best prices. This story happened a few months ago. As usual, I stopped at the supermarket after work. I never make big purchases, just enough for a few meals. So I leave around 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. and get there shortly after. The store is usually busy. One day, an employee near the produce area greeted me. This caught my attention because the next time I went there, he did the same. I hadn't noticed him before, but I never paid much attention to the employees. He was bald, had a small beard, and was of medium build. He seemed friendly, and the second time, he even asked how my day was going. We had a quick conversation for about 30 seconds before I said I needed to continue my shopping. This became a routine in the following weeks. Whenever I went shopping, he would say hi, and I didn't mind much because he was always friendly. However, when I was picking up ingredients, I was eager to get home and didn't want to chat. He started asking slightly more personal questions each time, like where I worked and where I lived. This started to make me uncomfortable. I didn't know if he was just being friendly or if he had ulterior motives. I told myself he was just being nice, so I continued to chat casually. I never saw him doing any real work. He was always just hanging around and talking to me. When I finally mentioned that he was bothering me, he seemed offended and walked away when I started talking. I felt like something had changed in his demeanor. I continued my shopping, and he went to the back of the store, which relieved me because I didn't need to pick up anything there. About 10 minutes later, I finished my shopping and went to pay. That day, I parked at the back of the parking lot, and as I got into my car, I saw the supermarket employee in a car nearby. I don't know how I noticed him, but I was grateful I did. I assumed he was leaving work or on a break. He wasn't looking at me, which relieved me. I left the parking lot and noticed he was following me. I drove to my apartment complex, but I got chills when I realized he was following me. I decided to drive around the neighborhood to see if he was still following me. He was still behind me, so I decided to go to a busy road. I waited for an opportunity and merged into traffic. He couldn't follow, which allowed me to escape. I drove a bit and, annoyed, decided to go back to the supermarket. I went to the customer service counter and told them what happened. They called the police, but they said no one with the description I gave worked there. I realized he must have been wearing a fake supermarket uniform. This made me even more worried. They said they would keep an eye on him if he came back, which reassured me a bit, but not completely. I drove home carefully and didn't see him again. I also avoided that supermarket since then. This happened a few weeks ago when I went to Walmart one evening. I think it was around 9 p.m., and I was there just to pick up a few things. When I entered the store, it seemed quite normal to me. It wasn't too crowded, but it wasn't completely empty either. I wasted no time and started walking to the right. The first thing on my list was to get more cereal. As I was heading in that direction, I remember seeing a man walking in the opposite direction. He was wearing a t-shirt that said, "God doesn't exist." I specifically remember seeing that. But then, I passed by him and kept walking. After getting the cereal, I headed towards the back of the store. I was there picking up the last few items, and it took me a little over 5 minutes. Then I headed back to the front of the store. When I got a little over halfway to the front, that particular area was very quiet. But there was someone there, and he caught my attention. It was the man. It was the man I had seen before, and he was standing in a random aisle, just throwing things off the shelf. It was as if he was trying to cause a mess. The man had slightly long, dark hair, and he was a little big, and a little less than 5 feet tall. When I saw him doing that, I couldn't help but look. I was just going to keep walking past him, but when I got close to him, I stopped. The man looked at me as he continued to throw things on the floor. I asked him what he was doing. I didn't say it as if I worked at Walmart or as if I was mad at him. I was just genuinely curious. The man looked at me as I spoke, but he didn't stop his actions. After my question, he looked away and completely ignored me. I looked around and didn't see any employees in the immediate area. When I looked back at the man, he was flipping me off. I thought about saying something to the guy, but I decided not to and just kept walking. Someone would see what he was doing soon, and he'd probably be kicked out of the store or banned. I continued on to the self-checkout lanes, so I checked out and started to leave. Well, I guess while I was checking out, the man with the "God doesn't exist" t-shirt came up to me without me knowing. Because as soon as I was leaving to go to the parking lot, I looked back and saw the guy walking behind me. He was about 30 meters behind, and at first I wasn't sure if he was just leaving at the same time as me or not. I don't even know why I decided to look back, but I'm glad I did. The guy seemed to be looking directly at me, which was weird, but I ignored it. I just continued as normal and got to my car. I unlocked and got in. I wasn't in a rush to leave or anything, but when I started the engine and was getting ready to reverse, I saw him. The guy had followed me to my car and was now standing right behind it. He was looking at me through the rear window of my vehicle. I waited for about a minute and he didn't move. Then I rolled down the window and yelled at the guy, asking him to move. He completely ignored me. He just stood there with a horrible expression on his face, like he wanted to kill me. This guy was really freaking me out. I honked, and he still didn't move. So I turned off the engine and got out of the car. At first, the man still didn't move. I asked him what his problem was, and he still ignored me. I really didn't know what to do. I didn't want to get close to the guy or anything because he seemed kind of unpredictable. I decided to go back into Walmart. As I was crossing the parking lot, the man calmly walked behind me, following me again. When I got to the doors, he was maybe 10 meters behind me. When I entered, I wasn't sure where to go, so I started walking. But when I got a little past the self-checkout lanes, I saw some employees standing nearby. The man behind me was still about 10 meters away, and one of the employees approached him. He tried to pass, but another employee blocked his way. I heard they were confronting him for throwing things off the shelves in the aisles. Someone must have seen him, or maybe he was caught on the security cameras. This allowed me to escape from the guy, and I turned around and left the store while he was still there. This time he couldn't follow me. I left and haven't seen him since. I hope he was banned from the store or something. But after the incident, I decided to buy a handgun for my personal defense. I really don't know why he did all that. It was like he was just trying to cause trouble. When I was 19, I landed my first job at Walmart. It's about 1 kilometer away from my parents' house, where I lived at the time. I was in high school and worked occasionally after classes or on weekends. During that period, I didn't have a car, so my parents would drop me off and pick me up from work. I was hoping to save up enough money from my job at Walmart over time to maybe buy a car. A couple of months after starting there, I had a night shift. I started at 4 in the afternoon after school and finished at 9 o'clock. I was a cashier and stayed at the checkout throughout my shift. Things pretty much followed that schedule. The store wasn't very busy, and there were really only 2 hours when there were a lot of customers. Other than that, it was pretty quiet. I managed to leave a little early that night. Around 8 p.m., my manager said I could leave now because things were very calm. I left the checkouts and went to the employee area to clock out. Then I texted my mom, letting her know I had left earlier. She knew I worked until 9 and sometimes left a little earlier or later. My mom responded quickly, saying she was on her way to pick me up. I left the store and went to the front of it. There were some benches facing the parking lot and the sidewalk area outside. There were also some plants and small trees scattered around. I sat next to a tree on a bench, where I usually waited for my mom to pick me up if she wasn't there yet. I took out my phone and waited. The parking lot was pretty quiet most of the time. It was starting to get a little later at night. Still, occasionally customers would enter or leave the store. There were also many cars in the parking lot with all the employees we had, besides the customers. I remember seeing this car, which was a larger and older SUV, enter the parking lot. It drove around and then passed straight through the entrance doors, which were a bit to my left. Then it went slowly and passed by me, heading to the other side of the doors. I saw it pass through those doors and turn left, heading back through the parking lot. I didn't really think much of it and returned my attention to my phone. But I remember that a few minutes later, I looked up and saw the car again. It came back, as if it were taking another lap around the parking lot. It was also moving at a very slow speed. This time, the car reached one of the aisles in the parking lot, and then turned in my direction again. It drove along the front of the store and slowed down even more. Then it stopped, literally right in front of me. I had a kind of bad feeling about it for some reason, but I was more confused than anything else. Certainly it wasn't my mom's car. After the SUV stopped, the passenger side window, which was closer to me, rolled down. Now, I could see that there was a man in the driver's seat, and he was looking directly at me. Then he shouted at me, "Do you need a ride?" The man said he could take me home or wherever I was going. I shook my head and said no, thank you. I didn't get a good look at the guy, but I remember he had dark, long hair and was wearing a baseball cap. He insisted that I should go with him and waved at me. I still said no, but the man didn't leave. I thought he would leave, but for a few moments, he just stood there. Then suddenly, the driver's door opened, and the man started walking around the car. The next thing I knew, I saw the guy emerge from behind the car, and he was coming towards me. He was moving quickly, and I quickly got up from the bench. I turned and ran to the Walmart entrance and didn't look back. I entered probably in 10 seconds, and then finally looked back. The man hadn't followed me into the store. I also didn't see him immediately outside. I continued inside the store, sitting on an indoor bench until my mother sent me a message saying she was there. She arrived about 5 minutes after I had entered Walmart and informed me that she was in the front parking lot. I went out and saw my mom's car and got in. When I did that, I felt much better. I told her about what had happened and we looked around. Then I saw the same SUV in the parking lot. This time it was parked in a spot and the engine was on. We left, and thankfully we weren't followed or anything. I remember that when we got home, I called my boss and reported the incident. I'm not sure if the guy came back or anything. For the rest of the time I worked there, none of that happened, and I never saw the man again. Last year I was shopping at my local Walmart, just doing some typical grocery shopping. The store was pretty quiet, and it was probably like 8 or 9 in the evening. I had been in the store for about 15 minutes or so, and I was in the aisle where they have the fitness items. I was looking at one of those massage guns. I wasn't planning on buying one that day or even buying one at Walmart, but I was considering getting one. As I passed by, I noticed and stopped to read the box. I was in the aisle looking at it for a few minutes, and while I was doing that, I remember hearing some voices in the next aisle over. It happened to be a toy aisle, and it was kind of in the back corner of the store. I heard a man's voice and then a child's voice. At first, I didn't pay attention as I was looking, but then I heard the man say, "I'll buy this toy for you if you come with me." I assumed it was the child's father at first, but I didn't really know why he would say that. I couldn't make out what the child replied, but I heard the man then say something like, "Your mom said it's okay." Then, I had the crazy thought that maybe this wasn't the child's father. The man started saying, "Let's go," a few times. I heard him starting to walk down to the end of the aisle. I just had a really bad feeling about it. At the time, I didn't know if I was just being nosy or if I should do something. I decided to walk down the aisle and take a look. I exited the aisle I was in and entered the next one, which was a toy aisle. And when I looked down, I saw a man wearing a black jacket and a winter hat, holding the hand of a small child and leading them to the end of the aisle. They were facing away from me. I was thinking fast and said, "Excuse me," to the guy. He turned and looked very surprised. I grabbed some random toy off the shelf. It was some kind of stuffed animal. I said I wanted to ask the man a question, if this would be a good gift for my niece. Then I started walking towards them. He said he had no idea, and I said I thought he might know. So I asked if that was his daughter. He said no, and that he was just watching her for a bit, but then said they really needed to go. He and the child then walked away. I really wasn't sure if I should believe him or not. Maybe I was making a mountain out of a molehill. I realized that was probably a reasonable explanation, and I turned around and started walking in the opposite direction. I was telling myself that nothing was wrong, and that I was just being paranoid. But I'm not kidding. About 30 seconds later, I heard a woman's voice calling out a name. For this story, let's just say the name was Sarah. The woman was calling for Sarah, not very loudly, but enough for people in the nearby aisles to hear, including me. I walked towards the voice and found the woman a few shelves down, and more towards the center of the store. When I got to her, I asked if Sarah was her daughter. She looked worried and said yes. I had a terrible feeling and said that maybe I saw her daughter with a man and thought they might be leaving. We both started running towards the front of the store. The good thing is that this was probably less than a minute since I saw the man. When we got to the front of the store, we saw the man and the child in the self-checkout area. He was buying one of the toys for her. The girl's mother started yelling, and the man claimed he was just trying to be nice and buy the toy for the girl. But he quickly tried to run away after realizing no one would believe that. He ran out the door and managed to escape momentarily. I was just relieved that the girl was okay and back with her mom. It turned out the girl had wandered away from her mom to look at toys while she was shopping in another area of the store. The mom thought her daughter was there, but she had actually wandered much farther away. I also found out that the guy was located not long after that.